Good morning. My name is Chris Fenton. I'm the Regional Master Technician for Melco. What we're going to cover today is the red wide angle cap frame driver. Some continuous improvements that have been made to the driver. Also, how to set the driver appropriately to your embroidery machine and install the driver. But first, before we get into that, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and happy holidays. It's a great time of the year, so you might be doing a lot of caps, so it's a pretty good idea that we get through this today. So the first thing that we're going to discuss, as I mentioned, was a continuous improvement that has been made to the red wide angle cap frame driver. If we take a look at this bearing block, it's going to be kind of hard for you guys to see, but inside this area here that goes over the lower shaft, this now has bearings. Whereas the previous drivers, that block is a brass bushing. So what we're going to start to cover with is actually replacing this block that has the brass bushing with the improvement block that has the bearings in it.
Is that a necessary change?
No, it is not a necessary change. The drivers that have the brass bushings are just fine. They work just as well as the ones with the bearings. So, in your operator's kit for your machine, you are sent this tool right here. This tool is specifically in the operator's kit for setting your red wide angle driver. So here in the middle we have got two attaching screws for this bearing block. So all we're going to do is remove these two screws. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
And now this block is free from the driver. So we will take our new block and we will go ahead and install it in the driver. At this time, we are just going to install this block loosely because we need to set it after we get it on the embroidery machine. So when we get to this setting procedure, this is also the procedure for adjusting your wide angle driver to the embroidery machine. Now, these drivers do come pre-adjusted, but with that being said, they might need to be fine-tuned a little bit. So if you are having some cap sewing issues and you've exhausted a majority of your resources, such as contacting Melco Tech, having them going through some troubleshooting items with you, proper sewing settings, things of that nature, you might want to look at adjusting this driver to the machine as a step also for curing your cap sewing issues. So now that we have the block replaced, we are going to install the lower arm assembly onto the embroidery machine. So to install this arm, you do have this little rotary hook safety cover that is mounted on the machine right underneath the rotary hook. On the right and the left side, there are two little silver button head Allen screws that require a 2mm Allen wrench. You don't have to remove the screws all the way out. You can just loosen them because if you'll notice on the cover, we have got a notch cut right here for the mounting point. So when you're going to install this lower arm, you loosen up these thumb screws. Now you don't take them all the way out because they'll fall out. And this item here is called a T-nut bracket. The long end of the T-nut bracket goes in first, and there is a channel on the bottom of the black lower arm of the machine. That T-nut bracket just slides into that channel. And you slide it all the way back until it hard stops. Once it hard stops, you go ahead and tighten these two large thumb screws. Now this bracket is secure to the embroidery machine. I would also recommend that you replace this cover back onto the embroidery machine. Reason being is if you're sewing a flat and you're sewing a hoodie and you have the drawstrings off of the hood, those can get sucked up into the rotary hook very easily without this cover being installed on the machine.
Or for this time of year, lush terry cloth robes, the insides of Christmas stockings.
All kinds of goodies. Okay, so now that we have that installed, this arm is now secure to the machine. Now, what's also very nice about this arm, and with this driver being two-piece, is you can leave this arm underneath the machine, or leave this attachment underneath the lower arm of the machine when you make your transition from caps to flats. So it makes the transition time from caps to flats very quick, and without having to take this off, it's yet another item that you don't have to worry about. So our next installation is going to be the actual driver itself. So as you can see here, we've got our new bearing block with the bearings installed. This tab here and this tab here, they interface with the two inboard mounting points on the X carriage. The X carriage is this black item here where your hoop arms attach. So what we're going to do is we go ahead and we slide the driver on, getting that bearing over the shaft that we installed. And then we're looking to slide those two tabs that I just showed you right over the top onto the X carriage. Now this is going to kind of lead us into setting this cap frame driver. If I am sliding this part onto the X carriage and I've got to manipulate these black tabs, those ones that I showed you previously right here, if I have to push that up to get it to clear over the X carriage, or if I get it over the X carriage and there's a gap between the two, which allows this black bracket to wobble, that's an indication that our driver is set incorrectly, and we might want to look at resetting our cap frame driver. This one here is not too bad. It's got I have to lift up just a teeny tiny bit to get it to slide over. So we're going to go ahead and reset this one. So if you'll remember before, we have already loosened up those two because we replaced this assembly. Now there's two additional ones that also need to be loosened up, and they are up here on the top part of the driver. You've got one right here and one right here. So we need to go ahead and loosen those two up also. So we have a total of 4, I guess positioning bolts is what you would call them, that we need to loosen up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crack the two up on top loose.
We've got a question.
Yes.
And this is a lot. Do you know the part number for that bearing block?
I do know the part number for that bearing block.
You do? You wrote it down. I can even type it in reply.
Is 34139-01. And it is available off of shopmelco.com.
Mike can get it from the background. Awesome. Cool.
So now that I have got these upper two setting points loose, I can go ahead and install my two thumb screws. These are the same ones that you use for your hoop arms. And I can go ahead and get this upper bracket secured to the X carriage of the embroidery machine.
So this is one for me, and I don't know if they can hear me, so you may have to repeat. Do you have to start one and then the other, or can you go all the way with one and then go all the way with the other?
You're probably better off to get them both started and then tighten. If you didn't hear, Nate's question was, can you get one all the way in and tight and then do the other one? You probably could, but what could happen is you might get things out of position, and then you're going to be forcing the second one, and you could strip out either the insert in the X carriage and or break the head off of the top of the thumb screw.
Thank you.
So I've got those in finger tight. I'm going to take a 6mm bent Allen wrench that comes in the kit. Again, the operator's kit of your machine. And I am just going to get that thumb screw snug and then maybe just give it a little. I'm not going extraordinarily tight on these. The head of that screw, if it does get over torqued, is actually designed to break off. So you just want to get them finger tight and then take your Allen wrench and give it just a little bit of shot. Same applies for when you're installing your hoop arms. So now I have got this black bracket with this tab and this tab. They are secured to the X carriage of the machine with the thumb screws. So now what I'm going to be looking for is I need to set the height of this cap frame driver relative to the needle plate of the machine. I'm not concerned of the height of the red drive ring to the silver bed plate. I'm concerned of the distance from the needle plate to the red drive ring on the cap frame driver. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move my hoop forward just till my red drive ring is over the needle plate. Now that's going to allow me to set the height of this red drive ring to the needle plate.
Very important, you started by selecting the frame in the software.
Correct. I did have red WACF selected in the operating software. So remember, I've got the black bracket attached to the black X carriage already. So I've already set the height of that. But when I'm setting the height of the drive ring, I might throw that black bracket into a bind. So I still have all 4 of my screws loose. So now what I'm going to do is Melco recommendation is 1 to 2 business cards. That's the distance we want in between the needle plate to the red drive ring. The lower you can get it, the better you're going to be without scraping. You want this drive ring to be as low to the needle plate as it can, because it's going to help eliminate flagging when you're sewing caps. So we're going to take a business card. I'm going to kind of bend it a little bit to get an arc in it so that it matches the contour of the needle plate. I'm going to raise my red drive ring up, and I'm going to put my business card underneath the drive ring. And now I'm going to, as you can see, if I push up on this drive ring, see how it's raising up and down? If I push way too high and too hard, watch this silver bracket right here. You're going to see the red drive ring buries into that bracket, and then I also throw a flex into the whole system. We don't want to do that. We want this drive ring to be as low as it can, about a business card off of the needle plate, to where it is not rubbing. And that is going to be controlled by the 2 lower ones down here for the block. So I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit of upwards force to get the height of that red drive ring set. And then I'm going to snug up the two lower ones. Now I need to tighten the two upper ones. And Nate, can we zoom into right in this area, please?
Show me again.
Right here. So if you'll notice, and I'll show you on this other driver here as well, on the side view, oh, okay, let's come back out. Okay, on the side view, you'll see these brackets mount right here. What I try to do is I try to get these two surfaces parallel or straight to each other when I'm tightening the upper two screws. Now, another thing that you want to watch out for is you can see this angle right here between these two brackets is a very nice 90 degrees. If we don't have that at a 90 degrees, we're going to put pressure on this, and then we could introduce chatter into the cap frame driver when it's moving forward or back. So I'm going to take this one again, and while I'm doing this, I'm going to see how that bracket does this? So I'm going to get it to where those two brackets are flush to each other. This is still the 4mm driver, yes. Okay, so I now have all four of the setting bolts. They're not tight, but they're snug to where things are not going to move on me. So I've got my two uppers and my two lowers. I'm going to go ahead and remove my business card. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the height between the red ring and the needle plate. As you can see, that's a pretty tight setting right there. I would be okay with running this cap frame driver at that height. Because what's going to happen is there is a little bit of flex in this driver. So as the driver's moving forward in the y-axis, it might cause this to drop down a little bit, and that can cause you to get a rubbing of the driver, the red drive ring, on the needle plate itself. So I'm pretty good with the height of that driver, but I still have one more thing I need to set, or actually check. I have got these two up here again where it connects to the X carriage. I'm going to go ahead and take these thumb screws out, and I'm going to slide that bracket off of the X carriage and back on again. And I'm going to make sure that I don't have to flex that bracket at all to get it to slide over the X carriage. If it slides over nicely right now, then we have our cap frame driver set and we are ready to start sewing. So let's see how we've got. So, perfect. So, Nate, I don't know if you could get really tight over here on, right here, right where it connects to the,
Pretty dark, but we'll give it a shot.
right there, perfect. So if you watch, see how I slide this off? I'm going to make a look. And see how it just slides right on. I'm not flexing anything. I have no wobble in that black bracket. It's sitting against the X carriage right now. So this driver is set pretty darn well for this type for this particular embroidery machine. Like we mentioned before, these drivers do come preset, but it might be just a little bit off for your embroidery machine. So if you are having cap sewing issues, of course, you're going to check all your basic items first. Proper hooping, proper backing, center out, bottom up on the digitizing of the design. Proper settings in your operating software for sewing caps. I personally like to run my active feed minimum at an 8 for sewing caps. I have a little trick.
You obviously wouldn't sew that low.
No. Let me reposition and I'll show you. So we are out of hoop limits right now because I needed to get the red drive ring over the needle plate. So we'll go to our operating software, commands, center hoop. And now we have our design in the center of the sew field. I like to run my minimum preset for my active feed at an 8 for caps. I use this little trick. I don't believe Bravo software does not have a standard option, correct? Okay, I don't believe that Bravo OS has a standard option, but if it does, you can click on the standard tab right here, and then you now have access to this box here that says Active Feed Preset. Click that. I like to use this as a guide for my minimum for my active feed settings when I'm in auto. So if I come down and you see poplin caps, it's suggesting a minimum or a thickness of 8. So if you're having some confusion over where to run your minimum active feed setting, I use this a lot. I think it's a pretty good little setting. Also on this box, if you find things that you use that aren't listed here, you can actually edit. You can do add and put it in there and call it good. So one thing to remember though is come back and check your auto box after you're done. So all that is it's kind of a neat little guide that happens to be in the software that'll give you a good starting point for your minimum preset setting for the active feed. So again, I can't emphasize enough how important the setting of this wide angle driver is to being successful in sewing caps. Cap sewing is a little difficult as it is, and then you throw in on top of it the equipment that you're using is not set correctly, and it's just compounding everything on top of each other. They do come preset, but they might not be exactly where it needs to be. So to complete this setting now, if you remember, I just had our 4 screws just snug. I didn't have them tight. So I'm going to come back through now and using that 4mm that's in your kit. As you can see, I am not getting them gorilla tight. I'm getting enough on there to where they're not going to move, but they're going to keep the setting of the driver. So that is the setting of the red wide angle cap frame driver. For older equipment, there are different cap frame drivers. They're listed as graphite drivers. If you think you've got a setting issue with one of those, just go to www.melco-service.com and on the top right, pick the tab for your type of machine And in the operator's manual for those machines, there is a step-by-step instruction on how to adjust all of the different types of cap frame drivers that we have out in the field. So they're very similar. You're going for the same settings, but your process is different. But drivers set incorrectly are going to show the same symptoms.
And if you have multiple machines with multiple drivers, do you tend to keep them together?
I highly recommend that you keep the driver with each machine, yes. Put a label or something on it with your machine name and or serial number, so that that driver stays with that machine. Also, be nice to these drivers. They're very expensive, and they can get out of adjustment quite easy. Just don't take them off and hook them underneath the machine. They come in a very nice cardboard box that has styrofoam cutouts that will hold the driver exactly how it's supposed to be. So just remember, if you take care of it, it'll take care of you. So now, if we wanted to remove this driver, all we've got to do is just the 2 thumb screws. And the driver will slide right off of the machine. Store it in the cardboard box that we were talking about. And go ahead and leave this on the machine. Nate, are there many applications that you've ran into where this would need to be removed?
So I don't have a mic, so you may have to repeat me, but I will at least wipe it down so that I don't get oil from that onto my garments.
So if you didn't hear, what Nate stated was he would wipe down this shaft right here so that he doesn't get oil transfer from this shaft onto the garments. And then oil it again using just your regular sewing machine oil that comes in the operator's kits. Just place a little bit of that on this shaft like that, and you are ready to go.
And just to note, time of year, now is the time of year, or getting to be the time of year where they will start having plastic storage boxes on sale at everywhere because everybody's cleaning up for the new year. And if your box is getting a little ratty, take that styrofoam, put it in that.
Good point.
Yeah.
If you couldn't hear Nate, plastic storage tubs that will be for sale now because everybody needs to store their Christmas stuff. If your cardboard box that the cat frame driver originally came in is getting a little tore up, go buy one of those plastic ones, take that styrofoam out of the inside, put it in there. Again, these are they're pricey. So you want to take care of it. And when it's damaged or misadjusted or has some sort of an issues, it makes sewing caps very, very difficult. So if you take care of this and have it properly adjusted, at least you know you've got one item out of the way when you're trying to troubleshoot.
So one more question. I mentioned oiling. The question is, do you oil with both the bushing and the...
Correct. Yes, you would oil both the bushing setup and the bearing setup.
Thank you.
Again, make sure you've got your sewing settings correct before you get going on sewing. Another thing that we will see a lot, this probably goes the other direction though, but when you're going from caps to flats, a lot of people will forget to adjust the presser foot back down. So keep that in mind, that after you're done with your hat, that you need to put your presser foot down, most likely probably to as low as it'll go, or maybe 1 to 2 clicks up if you're sewing flat garments. For sewing caps, I like to go 4 clicks up off of bottom. Again, that might change depending on the style of cap that you're sewing on. So that is it for the red cap frame driver adjustment. As you can see, it's not too difficult to adjust. That one adjusted pretty easy. You might have to do it 2 to 3 times to get it exactly right. But this is definitely a setting where you want to make sure you've got this thing set right. You don't want it where you're like, that's a little bit too high, and I've got to flex that bracket a little bit, but it should be okay. My suggestion is take the time and get it dialed in as best as you can.
I'm answering an operating system
Question? So again, if you have any questions, you can put them onto the Facebook, and we will answer them there. We also have email, service@melco.com, that you can pose some questions to there. There is also some also other embroidery forums out there where people have got a lot of experience. I believe my users group is still 100% going, so just try to utilize all your resources that you can. Also, www.melco-service.com is an excellent resource. There is a what's it called now? The FAQ tab on there that has just an enormous amount of information. And videos are being added to the Melco YouTube page also. So we're trying to give you all the resources that we can. So thank you very much for your time. Again, everybody have a safe and happy holidays.